Moving on, I want to talk about today about the impeachment sham ramping up. Folks, I got to tell you, if you think these leftists in Washington are on fire for impeachment, that's just the beginning, the very teasing beginning of what is happening in Washington. I want to bring up to date with just a few things that happened since we last talked last week. The House members did have a closed hearing, a closed deposition, in which they took testimony from the former American ambassador to the Ukraine, Maria Yovanovitch, and she was actually a holdover. I'm pretty sure she was an ambassador to Ukraine under Obama. Trump kept her on, and then President Trump came to realize that this ambassador, Yovanovitch, this American ambassador to the Ukraine, was essentially undermining and, in fact, maligning President Trump and the new administration. One key item that we did that came to America's attention was that when the Ukrainian officials wanted, after Trump was elected, Ukrainian officials wanted to present to America's government, to the State Department, that they had evidence of wrongdoing by the Biden, Ukraine Burisma deal, evidence of corruption under the previous administration, that this woman, she was in the tank for the Obama-Biden team. Our ambassador, then, of course, reporting to Trump, blocked the Ukrainian officials from getting visas so they could come over to America to present their evidence. They're thinking, why wouldn't the American government want evidence we've uncovered of wrongdoing? But this ambassador is really working, even though she's allegedly working for Trump, because he's now the president, she's really in the team of Obama and Biden. He fired her last, I think it was May or so. She testified in Congress on this past Friday in a closed hearing, which leads me to my next point in a moment. But she's very much there to malign and hand-wring and complain about President Obama. Point being, of course, she is not on Obama's team, never was apparently word getting back to Trump that she was undermining him in many, many ways. Apparently nothing of substance came from her testimony, or else you, of course, would be hearing about it. But I also want to think it was a great thing that Jim Jordan, so this is this update, the sham ramp, this is a sham of impeachment. The ramp up is going. They had her coming, trying to add kind of fodder to the argument that Trump has somehow engaged in wrongdoing in the way he spoke on the phone with Zelensky on July 25th. This is the whole basis of this impeachment. You have to get this. The whole basis of this impeachment is this effort to impeach is President Trump doing his job as president, talked to the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, on the phone July 25th and asked, aren't you going to look into the Biden corruption in the Ukraine in 2016? Adam Schiff and the other leftists running the U.S. House have decided they have to go with anything they can to get Trump out. Anything they can. That is the mission. The mission is not to investigate, to discern whether or not an impeachable offense occurred. It is to find something they can use to bring about impeachment. It's actually a little bit coming to a head this week. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, has indicated she may actually call for the vote this week. She was trying very hard not to call for the vote because she doesn't want the Democrats who are representing states where Trump won in that state. She doesn't want to have to deal with that. But she is, her hand may be being forced. It appears that she's going to have to call for the impeachment vote. So even if she got that, say that they get the vote and they get a number of Democrats to vote based on, again, nothing, they've got to go forward with proving the case for impeachment, which involves, of course, bringing forward this alleged whistleblower, who's the one who, this whistleblower submitted a complaint to Congress claiming that he, as a whistleblower, saw something, heard something, you just have to speak up, didn't really hear the conversation with President Trump and the Ukrainian guy, but, heard about it. So he wrote a secondhand report. We've been over this before, secondhand whistleblower complaint, acknowledged he hadn't heard a darn thing. But some things that have come out about this whistleblower I want to be sure and share with you. Although he has not been yet identified by name, many people think the whistleblower is probably this guy, Eric Ciaramella. Eric Ciaramella, not known yet, but the suspected whistleblower. And this guy is in, knee deep with the Democrats, or I should, neck deep with the Democrats, not just because he happened to be a whistleblower who innocently came along, but because he, in fact, this whistleblower, there are two aides for Adam Schiff who actually worked with this whistleblower in the White House. This has been acknowledged, apparently. House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff recruited 2 former National Security Council aides who worked alongside the CIA whistleblower at the National Security Council during the Trump administration. This was a story from the Washington Examiner. So this innocent whistleblower worked with 2 people now on Schiff's team, Adam Schiff being the Democrat, pretty much the leader beside Pelosi, the leader of the impeachment effort in the House. He has 2 staff members who worked with this whistleblower. And then on top of that, you have the whistleblower. Previously, the story was whistleblower had some connection, work with one of the Democrat presidential candidates in the past. Turns out that candidate is Joe Biden. So this innocent, naive, thoroughly to be believed whistleblower whose complaint is allegedly going to be used to take down the presidency of the United States is a former CIA official who didn't hear anything, who worked with 2 staff members on Adam Schiff's staff, worked with them when they were with the National Security Council, and worked with Joe Biden while he was vice president. This guy is neck deep in cahoots with the Democrats. I mean, I could go into detail after detail of all the connections he has, but this person, supposedly is Eric Ciaramella, is knee deep with the Democrats, neck deep with them, and yet the Democrats think this is a sufficient basis to impeach the President of the United States. These are very, very serious times. It's not just serious because, obviously, if the impeachment goes forward, it'll consume all of the U.S. House agenda for the rest of President Trump's first term. It'll consume their time. They'll have hearings of allegations. You have headlines out of all the left-wing media every day. Well, so-and-so alluded to, and so-and-so said maybe he heard this. You'll have headlines all putting Trump and impeachment in the same sentence, with the idea very, very clearly, very, very manipulatively and intentionally to get the American public thinking somehow Trump, impeachment, they belong together. Maybe Trump should be impeached. We have to demand as American citizens, as patriots, and if you were a voter for Trump, which I'm assuming most of my listeners were, you have to understand these people will take Trump out because his socks didn't match. They'll take him out for anything. They'll claim anything they can find. They will hold, in their view of the Constitution standard, they can say, they can vote. This constitutes an impeachable offense. And we'll be sitting with the president impeached, cannot possibly help his reelection chances, and we'll have the Senate where you have rogue, treasonous senators on the GOP side, Mitt Romney and others, kind of hinting maybe they might go along with this. I mean, Romney's been, just a thorn in the Republican side since the day he stepped into the Senate. And before that, frankly, he ran a spineless, just ridiculous campaign for the presidency, never could find the courage to actually stand up and articulate the danger of President Obama, the wrongness of President Obama, why people should go with Republicans instead of Obama. He ran a spineless, just tepid presidential campaign, never could criticize Obama, but man, he gets in the Senate and he can find one thing after the next to say about President Trump, and he's reportedly working within the Senate to figure out if he might be able to get enough Republicans to vote for removal. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. I think the U.S. Senate's not going to go for removal. Even the Republican senators who maybe aren't crazy about President Trump. Impeachment is a serious, serious, serious thing. Last question. So I don't think it's going to happen. But the whole idea we're even here over a non-serious charge, a non-serious allegation of what is not wrongdoing by the president, and yet we're this close, maybe this week, to a vote for impeachment. What it really tells you is the Democrats are desperate to remove this president. They can see perfectly well he's going to win re-election in 2020 unless they can remove him. They've been trying to remove him since before he was even sworn in January 2017, trying to find something. This latest hullabaloo over nothing is just the next step. There was a piece I want to quick tell you about Jim Jordan, who is one of the Republicans in the U.S. Congress who actually has a spine, is strong, is articulate, is speaking up, is doing his job, at least standing up and demanding fairness for this president. He put out a piece, it's called 17 Questions for the Democrats in this impeachment inquiry. And again, it's just an impeachment inquiry because they haven't held a vote yet. I do think, by the way, one more thing before I get to Jordan, I do think that President Trump, last week, I think I called this segment of the show, something about impeachment hardball. President Trump and his lawyers' willingness to respond to the U.S. House demands for documents of the White House, demands for witnesses, their willingness to respond just to say basically, no, we're not playing your game, Democrats who run the House. House Democrats, if you want to have a real impeachment, then you launch the official process and then we'll talk. But they tried to, through a series of 4 different changes in rules, to make it impossible for President Trump to actually have a chance in this impeachment inquiry or the impeachment process to call his own witnesses, defend himself, see transcripts of the testimony, ask questions of witnesses. The Democrats tried to set this up, as I went over last week, but it matters you understand this. They tried to set this up through changes they made in the rules once they had the majority again after the midterm elections of 2018, changed the rules to put President Trump in the worst possible legal position where the Republicans in the U.S. House would have no ability to ask questions, no ability to participate in the process. President Trump would have no ability to question the witnesses before him, to have any due process rights. And I think President Trump's decision last week, along with his lawyer, to send over that 8-page letter to the House saying, you know what, we're not playing your game. You want to have a real impeachment, you hold a vote, and then we'll talk about impeachment. It's forcing Nancy Pelosi's hand. It sounds like she is going to go forward and hold that vote this week. I guess we'll find out in the next few days. They also, in the House, are facing the reality that the Inspector General's report and maybe even Attorney General Barr's investigation and Durham's investigation, but definitely the Inspector General's report is coming out supposedly by the end of this week. Democrats need something in their column getting the American people's attention, because I think once that hits the public eye, once that is out there to be read, when you understand what the Inspector General found in terms of the corruption in the Democrat Party, inside the cabal that runs the FBI and the DOJ and frankly the CIA, there will be a lot of heads rolling, a lot of nervous people, a lot of Americans saying, wait a minute, what happened to our country? What happened to our rule of law? What happened to our FBI, our Department of Justice, our CIA? We want these people prosecuted. Pelosi wants to have that media time. She wants her headlines, House votes for impeachment, and maybe people won't pay attention to what the Inspector General says. Last quick thing on this topic, I want to just tell you some of the questions Jim Jordan raised, because they were all good questions. And by the way, if you're watching this, whatever you're watching or listening to it, if you want to read this whole email, this whole article that lists all 17 questions Jim Jordan had for the Democrats, you can go to my website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage under shows, drop down, list of links. It takes you to all of these articles. This is a great one to understand. 17 awkward questions about Pelosi's impeachment inquiry. It's a great, great piece. He had just one example. Why did the whistleblower, the alleged whistleblower, who's more like, he's not really a whistleblower, actually, it's kind of elevates him to undeserved status to call him a whistleblower. He's a complainer. He's a critic of the president. But why did he write an 800-word page memo describing the phone call between Trump and Zelensky based on secondhand information gleaned from a conversation that lasted just a few minutes? A few-minute conversation begets an 800-word memo. Why did the whistleblower wait 18 days to file the complaint after describing the call as frightening? So frightened, he waited 2.5 weeks. It's because actually the memo was being, I can answer this question, memo's being cooked up by the team that, Schiff acknowledges now that he doesn't say he lied. He says, I should have been a little more clear. He said he never met with a whistleblower. Turns out he did, but okay. So this is the whistleblower or the critic, whiner, using his ability to work with the Schiff team, the aides on Schiff's team, to come up with the most egregious thing they can come up with. Why and when did the whistleblower communicate with Representative Adam Schiff's staff before filing the complaint? Why is a good point. Why? If you have a whistleblower complaint, it's supposed to be about you see something that's gone wrong and you're determined to expose it. So you write your complaint, you explain what you're upset about, and that is what the whole whistleblower thing is for, is not to be a concocted critique of the president. Why didn't Adam Schiff tell his staff? Ask the Republicans his staff had met with the whistleblower. Why didn't the whistleblower just give his memo to the Inspector General instead of a 7-page complaint dressed up with extraneous citations and media references? Actually, several people familiar with the complaint were saying it read more like a lawyer wrote it. Actually, I'm not going to read all these questions, but they're really good questions. I wanted to do a segment today just hitting on the reality that this impeachment inquiry is coming down the pike. The Democrats are not pretending. They are nervous. They don't want to have to hold a vote. They don't want to have to embarrass themselves. They don't want to have to deal with close scrutiny of what the whistleblower actually said versus what the transcript says. They don't want the scrutiny that comes once they're focused on President Trump and a, whatever it was, 5-minute conversation with Ukrainian President Zelensky, and when the American public will be contrasting it with the ongoing relationship for years between Vice President Biden and his son, serving on the board with absolutely no ability of any kind to justify his position to be on the board of Burisma, making lots of money at it. The Democrats do not want the focus of attention to turn. If they get on to this impeachment thing with Trump and the Ukraine, everyone's going to be talking about Biden and the Ukraine. This is something that the Democrats are trying to steer us away from. So it's an amazing story going on in Washington. Clearly, we're not even close to the end of it. But I think it's important to keep track of the players, to recognize the Democrats have gotten exactly nowhere in coming up with anything even approaching an impeachable offense by this president.